we're going to create a wallet that allows us to create accounts on the blockchain, recover existing accounts, send crypto, and view transactions that have come in and out of that account. The cool thing about this tutorial is that we're going to be building it in such a way that we're going to be able to access our wallet either as a website or as a browser extension using the exact same code base, which is super cool. Another super cool thing about this tutorial is that we're going to be using ChatGPT, which is a super cool AI bot, chatbot that's going to help us write some of our code. If you don't have access to ChatGPT, that's okay. The code snippets will be in the blog post as well. All the code and all the code that I'm going to be referencing today is open sourced, and you can view it at this URL. Link will be in the description, and the tutorial will also be available here. And the link will also be in the description. So all the code snippets, all the links will be available here. Okay, so first thing we want to do, we want to basically go ahead and clone this repo, the Aqua Wallet GitHub repo. So we're going to copy this command here. I like to just use SSH, doesn't really matter. Git clone. If you can't use SSH, you can use HTTPS. I actually recommend using HTTPS unless you're familiar with SSH. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and clone that repo. I'm going to cd into that wallet, into that directory. And now we're going to go ahead and open that in our IDE. I like to use VS Code. Also, I will add, if you don't want to run this thing locally from scratch, you have two options. You can either do, you can create an existing React, you can create a React app from scratch using this command, or you can actually access this. You can actually access this code and edit it in your browser using a cloud IDE like StackBlitz. So then this way you can basically run all the code changes in your browser instead of having to like download stuff locally. And then as you can see here, the source code and everything is going to be the same in both the wallet here and the wallet here. So it's up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and run that locally now. And then continuing that, I'm going to go ahead and get the commit of the first. I'm going to go and get the hash of the first commit. And there's this cool browser. Yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and get this. And so you can see if you see here in Visual Studio Code, and let me open my terminal. If you see here in Visual Studio Code, you see there's already a bunch of files already added. We don't want to add that. We want to add that ourselves. So we're going to go ahead and check out the first commit. And then when you see this, one of the first things you'll see is that so one of the first things you'll see here is that it tells us we're in a detached head state. So we can basically fix that by getting onto a branch. We're going to call our branch get checkout create wallet. Beautiful. Next, we're going to go ahead and install the packages. Cool. We just finished running yarn install, and that command is now finished. So now we're going to run yarn start our server running locally. While that's running, we are going to go ahead and use ChatGPT for the first time. So the first thing we want to do, as you can remember in this demo we showed here, is that we want to add a button that allows us to create an account. So we're going to ask ChatGPT to just do that for us since it's pretty basic boilerplate code. So we're going to ask ChatGPT here to create a Typescript React component called account create. This component should have a button called create account that calls a create account function when clicked. And let's go ahead and see what ChatGPT can get for us. Looking good so far. One thing you can already see here is that ChatGPT is actually, pretty cool. Our server is now ready. So we're going to go ahead and check that soon. So one thing you can see here is that ChatGPT has created account create as a prop, which is not what we want. Actually, what we want instead is that we want this create account function to be defined inside the account create component. So we're going to go ahead and tell ChatGPT to help us fix that and say, create account function should be defined inside account create, not passed in as a prop. Let's see if we can fix that mistake. Okay, so far so good. So one thing you know already is that it doesn't actually need to have the interface account create props because it's an empty interface. So We can actually just fix that ourselves, or we can even just ask ChatGPT a question by saying, do we need the account create props? If it's empty, can you please remove it? So the props, is actually useful to have because if we do need it in the future, we can easily add it. But since we don't use it now, we don't need it. Since we're not using it yet, we can just remove it, and then we can actually take this code. So this code, honestly, to me, looks really good to go as is. We're going to go ahead and click on copy code, and we're going to go and create a new file called account create.tsx. And so we're going to click on new file. We're going to use this / to allow us to create folders, nested folders, without creating them individually. And then we can paste that code right there. So that code is actually already really good to go as is. And then we can, and like I said, they gave us an example of how we can use it. So we can go ahead and replace. So you can see our React app is running already really well here. But we can just go ahead and replace that by going to delete that, replace it with account create. And that's it. Very, very simple to start off with, but that's exactly what we need. ChatGPT has helped us to create a create account button. And then for those of you who are following along using the browser IDE, the process will be very similar. You're going to go ahead and just create a new file, scenes account create.tsx, like that. And then you're going to just go ahead, take all that code, paste it in there, go to app.tsx, and replace it with that code right there. And there you have it. All right, next we've asked to click a create account button, but basically your code to create an account goes here. So why don't we ask ChatGPT to help us write that code? So we're gonna basically ask ChatGPT, create a TypeScript function that generates a seed phrase, private key, and address using the Ethers library. So let's see if that works. Interesting. So this is actually very good. So this is actually very interesting. So ChatGPT actually was able to help us write code that would help us create an account and even show us how to use it. The problem that I had with this code though was that what if you want to recover an account? Because you can remember, as you guys remember, in this example we showed here, there is a recover account feature. So what if you wanted to add that recover account feature, right? And actually ChatGPT already anticipated that and says, if you want to generate a specific set of keys based on a seed phrase, which is what we want to do in the future, use from mnemonic, and then we can ask it maybe, actually, yeah, show us. What would that example look like? So can you please show, I'm using the word please. Some people said that we shouldn't be asking ChatGPT please, but I think why not? Why not be polite? Especially if we're about to end up taking over the world one day. Can you please show an example? And also another thing that's super interesting to note is that in the final example that we use, we actually do use from mnemonic. So that's actually super cool that ChatGPT was able to think about this as well. So let's see. So maybe instead of asking to implement this function, I could have asked it to, can you please rewrite this function using from mnemonic? But let's just see what this looks like here. Okay, so generate keys from seed. Cool. We're gonna basically say refactor function to allow seed phrase to be optional. Create seed phrase in function if it is not passed in. Refactor function to allow seed phrase to be optional. Create seed phrase in function if it's not passed in. So to walk you through what just happened, so first we asked ChatGPT to help us create some keys, which it did, but it's always gonna be a different key each time. Then it said, okay, if you want to use an existing key, you can do it this way. Then the problem with this way is that we have to pass in a seed phrase every single time. And then now it's basically doing something where if the seed phrase is passed in, it will create it from the seed phrase. And if the seed phrase is not passed in, it will create a new one. So this is actually perfect. And then and it, oh, beautiful, and it's even showing us an example of how to use it. Wow, this is very impressive. So we're gonna go ahead and copy that code. We're gonna create a new file in utils called account utils. So new file, generate keys, beautiful. And then, okay, so we need to add Ethers. We're gonna go ahead and install the Ethers package. And for those of you that are following along on the browser, you can just go ahead and search for Ethers. And it's going to start installing the Ethers package. Okay, so yeah, so while that's and then so basically then what we can now and then do is we can go inside the function here, and we can actually just go ahead inside account create, and then when create account is called, we'll go ahead and create an account, and then we can also basically then do something like. So first of all, we're going to print the keys to the console using console.log so we can see what's currently happening. And then we figure out that we actually can't use the generate keys function because we have to export it. So we're going to export the function so we can use it in a different. Oh, it made a mistake. ChatGPT made a mistake. So mnemonic returns a mnemonic type, but actually we need to get mnemonic dot phrase. So we just found a mistake that ChatGPT made. So in here it says dot wallet dot mnemonic to get the seed phrase, but actually it's dot phrase. So that's a mistake that ChatGPT made. Let's see if it can actually catch one of its mistakes. What we can do actually, we can take this error and just actually take. Now, one of the ways to debug in ChatGPT is to take the error message it gives you and put it into ChatGPT. Now, I realized this afterwards, but I didn't realize this while I was making this tutorial, that you can actually just copy paste the error message and just put it right into ChatGPT, and it'll be able to figure it out. You don't have to give it like the prefix of this function gives the following error. And I already know what the answer is, so I'm just going to go ahead and put that there. Account create, add import. So now, whenever we click on create account, it should help us create a crypto account. So let's see if that works. Oh, but see, I apologize for the error. Oh, ChatGPT caught its mistake. So see here, it called seed phrase wallet.mnemonic. I said, hey, you made a mistake here. It's not assignable to type string, and it caught its mistake. So now we can actually just take that code again, replace it in account utils, and then just make sure we export it. I'm sure if you ask ChatGPT, it could tell you how to fix the export issue. So now that is compiling. For those of you who are following along with the browser, you can just click on install missing dependencies and it will automatically install any dependencies your app needs to run. So that actually means you also don't even need to install Ethers. If you just put the import Ethers from Ethers, it'll automatically tell you to install Ethers. If you're running it locally and you get an error like this after you run yarn install, it usually means you need to stop the server and restart it again. Okay, cool. So it looks like it's working now. So let's just go ahead and right click inspect. Sometimes you have to rebuild the app when you install stuff. So let's kill that server and we're going to run yarn start again. All right, so I installed Ethers. I've restarted the server. I'm going to right click inspect. Cool. I've now right click inspect and then I'm going to go to my console. And then when I create account, let's see if it creates the account successfully. So I click on create account. And beautiful. I click on create account and it's created for me a seed phrase, a private key, and an address. Everything I need to create a crypto account. Beautiful. And now I'm going to show you how to implement that same logic if you're following along with the browser. So I've already showed you how to install the Ethers packages and the dependencies. So next we are going to go back to the code we generated. We're going to go ahead and copy that code and we're going to create a new file. We're going to go ahead and create a new file called utils, and we're going to account utils.tsx, or the ts. We're going to paste our function in there, export it. And then we're going to go back to ChatGPT and you call it the way they told us to call it. And we are going to go to our scenes, account create.tsx. And then when your code to create an account goes here, we're going to replace that with this. Quick fix, command dot, we're going to click on quick fix, and we're going to import from utils accounts.utils.tsx. And then we're going to print that to the console. So console.log Cool. And then now let's see if that works. If we click on create account, so now if we click on create account, brilliant. You can see we've created an account and it's generated an address, a private key, and a seed phrase. Everything we need to create it. And those are the three pieces we need for creating a crypto account. Okay, so we have now used ChatGPT to help us create accounts. But let's ask, so we've asked ChatGPT to help us write the code, but maybe it can also help us explain concepts. So we're going to ask ChatGPT, hey, how do Ethereum accounts go from a seed phrase to a private key to an address? Or actually, we can even ask it for that, how are Ethereum accounts created? So this is pretty cool now because here you can see that in addition to ChatGPT helping us write code, it can also help us explain concepts. The thing I think that's kind of interesting about this as well is, so actually what you could even done, so like I already know how Ethereum accounts get created, so I kind of did this in the reverse order. But what you could have done is you could have actually started off by asking how our account's created and then asking it for you to write code. So for example, like one thing I want to ask is how are accounts created from a mnemonic seed phrase? One thing about ChatGPT is that like once it's already telling you stuff you already know, I wish you could just kind of say, okay, thanks, I get it. Like, can I ask you the next question? Like basically interrupt. But I think the way like the runs in the GPU and the server, it's very hard to like stop something once it's already started. Okay, so another thing that might be interesting to know is asking ChatGPT, okay, how do we go from a mnemonic to a seed phrase? No, a mnemonic and a seed phrase are the same thing. From a seed phrase to a private key to an address. So how do Ethereum go from a seed phrase to a private key to an address? Okay, so this is actually not giving me what I want because there's actually some more intermediate steps. So what I want is, how do Ethereum accounts go from a seed phrase to a private key to a public key to an address? And you could say, what hashing? Because like there's a very specific answer I'm looking for, so you have to ask it in a very precise way. Okay, it keeps on giving me the same thing.
At this point, ChatGPT is still not giving me precisely what I want. It's explaining things using high-level tools like MyEtherWallet and Metamask, but I wanted to explain it in a very step-by-step way using lower-level tools like key sack hashing and things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically ask it again, but I'm going to use the keyword step by step. And that's a very important way of asking ChatGPT good questions, using the word step by step.
This is kind of a bit different because I kind of know what the answer is, so I'm asking in a very specific way. But by me kind of giving you a sort of blueprint, maybe this will give you a better idea of how you can ask ChatGPT questions as well. Okay, there we go.
As you can see, ChatGPT has given us a much better answer. So this is an example of how using the word step by step whenever you wanted to explain anything to you is a really, really helpful tool.
This is brilliant. So you can see here, now I've asked it very specifically how it works, and then it can kind of give me a step-by-step explanation. Another thing I can do is I can actually ask it to make a diagram to explain this process. So now we understand how this works, but maybe you're a visual learner. Maybe you want to see how this process works in the form of a diagram. Now, ChatGPT itself doesn't have the ability to display images. It does, however, have the ability to write scripts that can generate images, which is pretty cool. So, for example, there's a really great blog post by Useful that basically shows how to generate diagrams or scripts to generate diagrams using ChatGPT. So, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to ask, and then one of the things I found was that it works best using mermaid.js. So, I'm going to say, can you write a HTML file using mermaid.js that explains how this works in a labeled diagram? Okay, and then one of the things I remember in Usful's tutorial was that you use this tool called html.onlineviewer.net to see what it looks like. So then we can just copy paste our HTML code in there once it's ready. Okay, so this is the problem. Sometimes this request might not work, so let's try again. Can you make a diagram to show this? Okay, so now it's giving us so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try something different. So sometimes it gives you too many requests. So whenever it gives you too many requests, one of the things you might want to do is make a new chat.
So whenever you're getting too many request errors, one of the things I recommend you do is you make a new chat. In this chat, we're going to have to start our instructions from scratch. Now, I'm not clear, and OpenAI is not clear on whether or not the information we put in the last chat is going to be saved, the context going to be saved in this new chat. So all the instructions we wrote in the last one, we have to put it again in our initial command, and then also tell them we want to write a diagram.
Okay, so now we have to write very specific instructions. So can you please write a HTML file that uses mermaid.js that shows how an Ethereum account seed phrase gets converted into a private key and then publicly blah 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 blah. Brilliant, cool. Ethereum account. Oh, it even give it a title. Ah, okay. So it's not giving us what we want.
So at this point, I thought that ChatGPT was just explaining it to us in HTML and not making the diagram. What I didn't realize, and as you're about to see, was that it was explaining it first and then it's going to create the diagram. So actually, it did end up giving us what we want, but the issue, as you're going to see very soon, is that we ran into the token limit. So we're going to show how to fix both of those issues.
Oh, cool. It's actually going. But the thing is, we're going to run into the token limit. I feel like because it's already been pretty long. So let's see how far it keeps going. Yeah. So basically, we're into token. Can you please use memory.ds to create this process? How about that? So it was actually about to give us the. Okay, here it is. Okay, beautiful. So it's about to give us the answer. Brilliant. So it's actually giving us exactly what we want. So if we copy this code into our HTML online viewer, um, brilliant, brilliant. So it's how we go from seed phrase to private key to public key to address. Now, what if you want to see? So if you remember, ChatGPT mentions some things here about PBKDF and like the KECK hash. Maybe we can also get ChatGPT to include on the diagram. Can you please label labels to the diagram? Arrows in the diagram showing where.
So back to the prompt engineering tips for ChatGPT. Another thing you probably want to do is you want to separate the explaining step and the diagram making step into two separate processes so that A, you don't run into the token limit, and then B, you can fix either of those two commands without having them combined together.
Okay. So now we want to add a bit more labels to our diagram. Also, another important thing I'll mention, and I talk about this in my Twitter thread, was that when ChatGPT first ran, I think it was using like 8.4. So the code it generated was like 8.4, which wasn't working. I forget the version, but it basically was using a version that wasn't working. So I had to tell it to basically use latest. So it looks like that issue has now been fixed. These are all like little things you will have to watch out for when using ChatGPT. Brilliant. So look at that. So now it's helping us. So it's making the diagram again, but this time it's showing us the diagram with the label. So if we copy this code, we go to htmlonlineviewer.net, we paste that in there. Brilliant. So look at this. So ChatGPT has basically not only explained to us. Look at this. ChatGPT has helped us explain how we go from a seed phrase to a private key to a public key to an address. And they've also explained to us a diagram showing how the process works, right? So from PBKDF to ECMDA to KECK hash to the address. So ChatGPT has helped us learn how something works and write code to implement it. Very cool. All right, so we've added a way for us to create an account. However, what we want to do now is also add a button that can recover an account. And what the recover account button is going to do actually is that if I refresh the page, um, the first time it's not going to show anything. When we click on recover account, it's going to show the recover account input, and when we press enter, it's going to submit. So we can actually just ask ChatGPT to do all that for us.
This is why I say prompt engineering is such an important field. If we know how to ask ChatGPT the right questions, we can get it to implement more complex functionality like clicking buttons, showing an input field but only show it the first time you click it, etc. The key is we need to know how to write good instructions. We need to be extremely detailed. Another thing I've realized is that because of the token limit, we have to figure out ways to write prompts in such a way that a given file will only do one thing and it'll be a pretty small file. That way we can separate our prompts and answers into multiple different files.
Okay, so remember, so we currently have this, we want to add another button called create account, that when we click on create account, it should show us a text, right? And then when we press enter on that text, it should submit. Beautiful. So you can see already it knows how to use state, and it also has a seed phrase state. So this is already exactly what we want. So it's calling create account, recover account, set show seed input, true, handle seed phrase change, handle seed phrase submit. Okay. Wow, this is exactly what we want. This is exactly what we want. All right, so now let's see if we can copy paste this code as is. So copy that code. So this is what it currently looks like. If you just paste that in there. Oh, it should be generate keys. Okay, so that's all. That's the only mistake. So we're gonna just call create account maybe like twice. So we call create account once. We call create account again. So now let's see if we can recover the first account we created. We're gonna go in here to keys, and we're gonna copy that seed phrase. We're gonna click on recover account. Oh, it showed up. We're gonna put enter there, and if we press enter, it submits. And does it generate the same right key phrase? Yep, same address, same private key. Wow, so this code worked perfectly. Okay, so next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna add some stylings. We're gonna make it look nice. We're gonna use Bootstrap.
Because we want our app to work as both a web app and as a browser extension, we are going to be using compiled CSS and JS Bootstrap. So this means that we're going to go to the Bootstrap website and download the CSS and JS files ourselves, and then rename the folder to Bootstrap, and then drag and drop that Bootstrap folder into the public folder directory.
Then following the example in this commit, which again will be linked, we're gonna go into our index.html, and let's see, somewhere around line 18, we're gonna put our CSS file, and somewhere around line 44, we are going to put our, right after body, we're gonna put our Bootstrap JavaScript file. Cool. So we can already see some differences being made. So actually, why don't we just ask ChatGPT to help us rewrite this code with Bootstrap?
ChatGPT again does a very good job here answering the questions and writing the code. The problem here is that it's going to be providing us a lot of additional fluff that we don't need, and we're going to hit the token limit, most likely, maybe. So this is why, again, being very specific in your responses and telling ChatGPT what you don't want it to include by saying things like only include code snippets, don't explain, don't include explanations, is another great way to stay under the token limit.
Now, this is actually exactly what I want. My only concern is that we're going to hit the token limit because this is a lot of characters, but let's see if we're able to generate the code that we want.
So it looks like we're actually in luck. We were able to stay within the token limit.
Wow, this is amazing. So not only does it, this is exactly what we want, because here's the thing. It even knows that create account is a primary button, and it knows that recover account is a secondary button. So we can just copy that code. Look at that. It generated exactly what we want. So now create account, recover account. And then if you click on recover account, it gives us a seed phrase that we can use. And then if we put the seed phrase in.
All right, so what I'm showing here is how to get the seed phrase. So if you right click in your page, you go to inspect, and you go to your console, you're able to see the private key and the seed phrase. Just copy paste that seed phrase, put it in, press enter, click submit, and then you can see in your console the account that was generated.
And look at that, it works perfectly. So we were able to add Bootstrap styles to our React component easily. If you are following along on your with the browser, if you want to add a file, now you can try dragging and dropping, but I believe it won't allow you. Oh, it worked. Okay, so last time I tried to do it, it said that you need to be a premium user, but I guess now it's letting you drag and drop files. Okay, cool. Yeah, so that there you go. And then so basically we can take the same component here as well. Same thing we did in that example. Go to our account.tsx.
So the beauty of StackBlitz and Visual Studio Code using the same underlying IDE is that the process for creating a file in the web browser is the exact same. And if you're missing dependencies like ethers and peer dependencies, it'll automatically install that.
So now we've added the ability to create or recover an account and added Bootstrap styles, all while using ChatGPT. That is pretty cool. Cool. So now it's time for us to build our extension. So what you're going to do now is you're going to go ahead and do yarn build. And then I do not believe this is available if you are running this from the browser. So if you're running from the browser, you can basically use it as a web app. If you're running this locally, of course, you can run this command. So we're going to run yarn build. Once that's done, you're going to have a build folder. So then we're going to go to Chrome, extensions. Make sure we have enabled developer mode. So we're going to click on developer mode. And once we've enabled developer mode, we'll see load unpacked. We're going to click on load unpacked. Beautiful. So now we've built our package. We can see it here. And it has all the relevant index.html and JavaScript files that we need. Cool. So we're going to go ahead and select that, drag it over here. We're going to click on select. Okay, so a couple of things we need to add first before we can build our app. We need to add a manifest version. And actually, there's a couple of things we'll need to add. So let's just do that right now. All right, in order to make our web app into a browser extension, we need to add a couple features. First thing we need to do is add a manifest version. So we're going to go to public manifest.json, and we're going to add maybe right underneath name.
Now we're going to be just adding the necessary keys in order for it to be a valid browser extension. So things like manifest version, icons, name, description, etc. And all these instructions will be available in the link to the Tila GitHub, and you can go to tree version 1.00.
Okay, so let's go over some of the stuff that we've added here. This is actually the most important part here. And basically, we're not asking for any permissions right now. This is the most important part. This means that when we click on pop-up, it's going to open up index.html. And when we hover over the browser extension, it's going to show open wallet. So we've added the necessary features: manifest name, description, manifest version, action, permissions, and icons. And let's go ahead and build that now. And now the beauty of this is that it will automatically update. So we don't have to drag and drop each time. As long as our build folder stays in the same location, we can just click on retry. Awesome. So we have added the necessary stuff. Our project has rebuilt. So we click on retry. And beautiful, there you have it. So we already have some errors. What's going on here? So unrecognized manifest key, background color, display, start URL. So yeah, we can remove all this stuff then. Background color, start URL. Yeah, so all this stuff we don't actually need. Next thing we can do, now we can do update. Details. Yeah, so now we can click here and we can pin the extension. And so now we can either access our wallet through localhost 3000 or we can access our wallet here. Now, as you can see, it's very squished. And the reason for this is that we didn't provide how wide it should be, right? So we can actually just right click and inspect to see how wide we think it should be first. And then we can go change our CSS code. So we can just go in here, maybe go to class app, and maybe let's say the width, like let's say 500 px. So yeah, if we have a width of 500 px, that'd be pretty good. We probably want to maybe add a container as well out here. So we want to do two things. We want to add an M3 class and we want to add a width so everything doesn't look so squished. So we're going to go to app.tsx, app.css, my bad. And we're going to set .app to have a width of, and then we're going to go to app.tsx, and we're going to add a M3 class name to our Bootstrap style. And then, so this is why I want to try to make as many changes as possible so you don't have to build each time you want to make an update. But so for now, we've added those two new things. We're going to run yarn build again. And like I said, the benefit of this is that we just have to run yarn build. We don't have to do the drag and drop. And then, so let's see if that changes gets reflected. Cool. So now our thing has finished, our wallet has finished building. So now if you click on this again, you can see now it's not squished anymore and there's good spacing around. So the benefit of having our wallet as either a web app like this here, or as a browser extension is that it means that we can access our wallet while we are browsing different websites. I'm going to save this icon. And remember, all this stuff that I'm showing is going to be linked in the description. So just save this to somewhere you can access locally in your file system, like your desktop. And then you're going to basically change the name to something simple and then use that in your VS Code. rename them to wallet logo.png, and then in our manifest.json, we're going to replace all instances of logo 512 with wallet logo.
And then so what we're going to do is to find all the instances where we use the old logo name and replace it with the new logo name in both the manifest.json file and the index.html file.
Let's add some more classes to our account create component to make it look even better. So I like to give it a drop shadow. So we're going to go to source scenes account create.tsx.
So we can just find this code snippet in the account create GitHub file for Aqua Wallet, and then we can just basically add card shadow and maybe some padding in a margin to give it a nice drop shadow to make it look nicer.
If we set the width to 500px, on devices that are less than 500px, it's going to go over the screen. So we're going to set a max width to 100%, so it's also mobile friendly. And so if you're not sure where to find all this stuff I'm looking at, if you go to tags, you should be on release 1. All the code used in this tutorial will be based off of release 1. So basically you can just come here.
So what I'm really doing here now is modifying the code that ChatGPT generated for us to suit our use case a bit better and make it look a bit nicer and better functionality. And then so to follow along here, you can go to the Aqua Wallet GitHub page and then go to tree 1 and just copy paste this code snippet and follow along with what I'm doing here.
All right, so now we have the basic functionality of our app up and running. We can create an account and we can recover an existing account. What we want to do next is that we want to basically add the ability for us to actually see the details of the account which we've just created. So we've shown how we're going to implement our code using ChatGPT. So now we're going to write some more code ourselves. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to basically create now the ability for us to actually see the details about the account after we've either created or recovered it. So in order for that to work, we're going to do a couple things to our code. First of all, we're going to define an account model. So we're going to create a new model object here, new file, models account.ts. Perfect. And just use the code here. So every account has a private key, an address, and a balance. Theoretically, we could also add in a recovery phrase to this account, but we'll just leave that off for now. So the next thing we need to do is we need to define an account detail object. So we're not really going to be doing a lot of work with that yet. So we're just going to go ahead and stub that out. So source scenes account, we're going to do new file. We're going to go account detail.tsx. I'm using a plugin that allows me to quickly do this. So I'm just going to go ahead and do React functional component RFCE. There you have it, account detail. So now we have our account detail, we have our account, and then we also have some more code here. And I'm just going to walk through some details about this. So when we press send, when we press enter on the key down, it's going to submit and recover an account using the provided seed phrase. And then when we generate the account, it's going to set our state variable, which we define on line 13, to be the created account. So we see here, private account does not exist on type seed phrase. Okay, so the next thing we need to do, we need to go in and change our generate account function. So if we go into generate account, remember we renamed that from generate keys. We can now see the correct implementation of this. And so if you're not sure where to find all this stuff I'm looking at, if you go to tags, you should be on release 1, and all the code used in this tutorial will be based off of release 1. So basically you can just come here and we're going to go to utils, account utils.ts. We can just go ahead and copy that function. And then if you just fix that, there you have it. So now let's see what our app looks like. So now when we click on create account or recover, okay, so we have another problem here. Okay, so now we need to fill in account detail. So we can go back to our code. So there is a lot of things happening here. So I'm going to explain each one by one. So we've defined our account detail. We're going to create an account detail props that takes in a account as a prop. So then we can pass that in like this.
So essentially what I'm doing right here is refactoring account detail to match the way it is in the Aqua Wallet GitHub repo at tree 1.
All right, so we have created our account detail, and to make it super simple, we can just make it such that address is going to show Okay, so super simple to start off with. So then to kind of recap what we've done is that we've now basically updated our account create to have state of a seed phrase and account and to show the recovery input. Then we've basically defined um, a model called account model that defines what variables each account should have. And we basically created a super simple account detail that will show some details about the account. And then so now when we click on create account, we'll be able to see the details of the account that was just created. And then if we want to recover an existing account, we can just go ahead and paste it in there like so. See that this address is an existing account. Another cool thing about the way we've implemented this function is that if the seed phrase includes a space like it does here, that means that we're going to create the wallet from a mnemonic. And if it doesn't include a space, like let's say we have a private key, like we have here, and we're going to create the wallet from a private key. And then that way we can use either a seed phrase or a private key to restore an account. And you can see the address here has stayed the same. The other thing that we've done is that each time we recover an account or create an account, we are going to save the recovery phrase to our local storage. So if I right click inspect here, and I go to my application, you can see that the recovery phrase is right here. So this basically means that if we were to refresh the page, all the account details from the last time we were running this application is now saved. Now, of course, for security stuff, you might not want to save your private keys to local storage, but for demo purposes and educational purposes, it's fine for now. So next thing we want to do is we want to basically show some more details about this address. Like for example, we would want to know how much ETH does this address have? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to go to account detail and add some more function to account detail. And so again, make sure that you are browsing at tree 1.00. Okay, so now let's go to account detail and let's copy this code here and then walk through what each of it does. Okay, so the first thing we're going to see about account detail is that we're going to have to define a couple functions. All right, so we're going to define a couple more utilities. We're going to define a chain model, and we're also going to define a toFixed if necessary utility function. So we're going to go to account utils, and we're going to copy this code here to fixed if necessary. What the account utils function basically means is that since we are dealing with ETH, if there's too many decimal places, it will basically make sure that it only goes up to 2 decimal places or whatever we set it to. Okay, let's go back to our account detail. So next we're going to define a chain model. So go back to model, we're going to make a new file. We're going to call it chain.ts. Let's see what we're going to put inside that chain model. So a chain basically represents a blockchain, and we're going to start with the Goerli Ethereum testnet blockchain. Ideally, we'd want to put this in the environment variable, but for now it's fine. So each blockchain, so we're going to have Goerli, we're going to have the Ethereum mainnet. So we have a chain ID, a name, a block explorer URL, and an RPC URL. In our chain.ts file, we have defined a block explorer URL, and an RPC URL for the Goerli testnet chain and the mainnet chain. There's a couple of ways for us to get this RPC URL. The simplest way is to search on the internet for Goerli RPC URL. And then, so the last time I searched this, Chainlist wasn't one of the top links. So I have to search for Chainlist. And then I recommend using Chainlist. And that will basically take you to a list of different blockchains you can use. Once you do that, you're going to go ahead and search for Goerli. You're going to include testnets. And then you'll be able to see a list of different RPC URLs. And you can basically just copy any of those. Okay. There should be a copy to clipboard shortcut for this thing. Yeah, so the UX on this thing isn't too good because it truncates it. But yeah, so you should be able to use any of these RPC URLs. As you can see, the problem with some of these URLs is that sometimes they will go down from time to time. So again, same thing for mainnet. And you can see there's a lot of RPC URLs, so you can use any of these ones. Again, usually you want to pick one that has low latency, good score, and maybe even privacy. Now, of course, Flashbox. Okay, of course. Now, the problem with these URLs is that they might go down from time to time. So one of the best, most reliable ways to get a steady RPC URL connection is using Infura. So now I'm going to show you how to get an RPC URL using Infura. We're going to go ahead and click on Get Started.
I'm kind of skipping through all the Infura setup steps because they're pretty self-explanatory. But the most important piece here is that when it's time for you to pick a network, you can choose Web3 APIs.
Network Web3 API. Okay, yeah, that's what let's see. Okay, brilliant. So what do we need? We need the network endpoints. So we want Ethereum. And so for the Ethereum main, we can just copy that to clipboard and replace RPC URL here with that. And then we also want Gorley. And copy that. There we go. So as you can see now, we can get a Gorley RPC URL using Infura. There's also other RPC URL providers. You can search them up. Or we can try and get a free one using something like Chainlist or a site like rpc.info. Again, sometimes, apparently some of these RPC URLs might be a bit sketchy, so just be a bit careful. Infura is a bit more of a well-known company, so you can also use that option as well. Beautiful. And so with all that stuff done now, we need to create an account.css file, so we're going to do that as well. New file. And there you have it. So we have everything that we need. You know what? So let's actually just go ahead and put our code in account.css, and we can explain what goes in there later. This is for when we have the table of transactions. Cool. So as you can see now, so when you click on create account, it shows us this new account and we can view it in the Etherscan block explorer. However, if you want to find an existing account, we can click on recover account and we can use that private key that I told you about earlier. Press enter. See that we have now recovered an account that already has some ETH in it. And if we click on the address, we can see that it takes us to the Gorley account and we have some transactions already at this address. Next, we're going to send some crypto from this wallet. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a button that allows us to send ETH. And so if we go back to our source scenes in tree 1.0 and we go to account detail, we'll see that there's some code here for sending some crypto, right? So we have a form for, and again, we can obviously use this stuff in with ChatGPT to help us write it, but I'm just going to write it myself since I've already shown how to use ChatGPT. So we're going to go ahead and copy this code right here. So now we need to go ahead and implement all these mission functions. So we have an input that can take the destination address and the amount. And then we also have a button to send the ETH and the network response status. So one good habit to get into is that anytime you're making external calls to things in the network, you want to get into the habit of showing the user whether it's pending, whether it's complete, or whether an error occurred. So we're going to go ahead and implement some of these functions now. So we can actually just copy paste everything here. Okay, so let's walk through what happens in this code. So we have some state variables, the destination address, the amount that is we're going to send, and the balance that's currently in our account. And then this is the network response of us sending a transaction. So use effect, basically this means that whenever we load a new account, the first thing it's going to do is going to call Ethers to basically get us the balance in that account. And this here means that every time the address changes, we're going to call this fetch data function again. If the destination address changes, we're going to update those two in the state. Okay, now this is the important part. This is the transfer function. So this is where a lot of the logic happens. And basically what's going to be happening here is that when transfer is called, which is when the send amount of ETH button is clicked, we're going to call the send token function. If it completes successfully, we're going to show complete and a URL to the transaction on the blockchain. And then if it doesn't complete properly, then we're going to basically show failed to send, and then we're going to have to show an error response to the user. So now, of course, we need to implement the send token function. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and make all the necessary imports. And again, just to be clear, in case people are not sure how I got here, if you just go to code on the Ethereum repo, right? Usually when you just come to the Ethereum repo from scratch, you will end up on this page. Then you're going to go to release tags. You're going to go to tag 1.0, and then you can basically just find the relevant file. So for example, right now we are in account detail.tsx. Cool. So what do we see here? So we need to create a send token function and account transaction. So again, account transaction, we can just comment that out for now. We're not going to be using it yet. And then so now we're going to implement a transactions util file and the send token function. So utils, new file. Okay, and then we are going to go to
So now we just go to transaction utils in the Aqua Wallet v1 GitHub repo and copy paste it into our code.
Now remember, all the stuff in here, chains config and Goerli, we've already implemented that earlier on, so we can just basically get all that stuff from here. Or if you can't find it, you can go to source, models, and then chain.ts. Brilliant. Okay. Yeah, so like we said, we implemented a function here called transfer, and transfer is called when we call transfer, we call the send token function. So what's happening in send token? So the first thing send token is figuring out, okay, on what blockchain are we calling this transaction? So we figured that out here. Then we're saying, okay, well, in order for us to authorize sending a transaction outside of our wallet, we need to get the private key. So that's what happens on line 17. And then we basically say, okay, so what would this send transaction look like? So all we have to do is put in the destination address and the value and convert that to Ether. Then we send the transaction, then we wait for the response and give the response back to the user. So once we tie all those pieces together, now we can send a transaction. The problem here is that we have 0 ETH in our wallet. So we need to get some crypto into this wallet. So I made a very big mistake. So one thing I realized is that once after I've created an account, I need to be able to get back to the previous account. So we need to actually add in the ability that after an account has been created, we need to actually save that to local storage as well. So we're going to use this thing called the faucet. So getting a faucet is very difficult sometimes because they typically go down. So I just recommend you just Google Goerli faucet and you just pick any of these different faucets and just trial and error basically. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we are going to use the first link. So we're going to go ahead and use the first link, which brings us here. And then we can go ahead and copy this address. So I'm already logged in, so you might have to log in order to get this faucet or create an account on Alchemy. So I'm already logged, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy that address, put that in there. You can see the status of that transaction. And actually what I'm going to do while I'm here, I'm going to right click inspect so I have the private key saved. Go to my application, see recovery phrase. And so you can see here now that we have 0.2 Ether in the wallet we just created. So what we can do now is we can basically send it to another address. So you can basically, there's lots of different ways to find test addresses. One way you can do is you can just sort of go on here, go to the homepage of Etherscan and just literally pick any random address here. For me, I'll just keep it safe. I'll just pick the same address that was sent to me. So I'll just send it some ETH back. So they sent me 0.2 ETH. I'm going to copy this address and I'm going to send it to this address. I'm going to send maybe 0.001 ETH. Click on that. Another interesting, cool thing to do is to see what's happening here. So once we click on send ETH, basically the RPC URL that we set up is basically making a bunch of calls to the blockchain to basically check, to send the transaction and then wait to get a response back. So you can probably see one of these things here. We can see that basically we just wanted to set what's the chain ID that we're currently on and then to get a response back. And then I think one of these, I don't even know what the call is. Yes, I think this is the one when the transaction finished. Yes. So get transaction receipt. So after the transaction had finished, you call get transaction receipt, and we can see these are all the details of our transaction. And then now if we click on view transaction,
we can see that our transaction was successfully published to the blockchain.
All right, so right now, if we want to see all the transactions that have come in and out of our address or our account, we have to go and use Etherscan. But what if we could see all that information from within our wallet? Something similar to this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to go back to our code base. So remember, like I said, we're going to go back to the Aqua wallet. We're going to go to the tag one. And so we're going to go to account details. So source, scenes account detail. And we're going to add the account transactions at the bottom of the page. So this is going to show all the transactions for a given account. Then we're going to go and create a new component called account transactions. So there's a lot of stuff going on in account transactions, so we can break it down. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to basically define a transaction model. So we're going to go to source models and create a transaction model. Okay, so this basically tells us that every transaction is going to have a hash that we can use to find it on the blockchain, who the transaction came from, who it went to, and the value in the transaction, and the block timestamp of when the transaction happened, or the block where the transaction was mined. Next, we're going to define a transaction service. So I'm going to get back to this in a second. And then the short address utility. So we're going to go to source, utils, count utils. And this just basically means that these addresses are long. Short address basically just says that to save space, you don't have to show all of the entire address the whole time. So you can just go ahead and put that in there. So let's see why I counted this in there. So I can import it. So that line we commented out earlier, we can uncomment it. Okay, so next is transaction service. So in order to get all the transactions, we're going to be using the Morales API. Now, this introduces a third-party API. So there's some very important things I want us to consider before or whenever we want to use a third-party API. So right now, read from the blockchain directly. Reading from the blockchain is very hard to get data like all the transactions for an address. So it's often easier just to use something like Morales. So the first thing is don't just use Morales right away. What are the other options? So the other options were Morales, Alchemy. So Alchemy has categorized transactions for an address. And then also we have something here. We have Etherscan. So Etherscan is also another one that's pretty good. So out of all of these, so the problem with Etherscan is that for Etherscan, if you want to support multiple blockchains, like let's say Ethereum and Binance Smart Chain, maybe Polygon, that would require 3 different API keys. Alchemy and Morales have that all those different chains supported in one. Alchemy versus Morales, let's look at there's a place here where it shows supported chains. But basically Alchemy does not support Binance Smart Chain, even though it's the second largest blockchain by transaction fees volume, whereas Morales does. So I just chose Morales. The final point is, okay, now that I've decided on Morales, why are we using the Morales API? Why are we using the Morales API and not the Morales SDK? And the reason for this is, again, once you're using a third-party provider, you want to reduce how much you're having your code decoupled to their code base. So if we were to use a Morales SDK, first of all, remember, we're going to be using it as a browser extension. So we'd have to install yet another package. That's the first problem. The second problem, so size is the first problem. The second problem is that too much of our code is going to basically be like Morales specific, right? So we're going to basically have to be putting into our code, so if we decide to switch over to a different provider, we now need to basically refactor a bunch of our code. Whereas with this method, this transaction service here doesn't even know who our provider is. All it says is there's a service that gets us a lot of transactions given an address. So we want to separate the third-party provider from the service itself. Because some people say like they might rug as well, right? So you never want to be too decoupled to you never want to make your code too coupled to one provider. Inside the transaction service, we will be using Morales as our transaction service API. And then so in order to get the API key, we need to do a couple things. So first of all, we can just go ahead and search.
This might be self-explanatory, but it always helps to let people know. You can just Google Morales API key, and that will take you to where you need to go.
So we can see here Morales API key. So in order to use the Morales API key, we need to use the Morales admin dashboard. So it tells us right here that we need to go to the Morales admin dashboard. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we need to create an account first. Also very important, even though in this example I'm putting the RPCURL API key directly into the code, you should not do that. You should instead put it into an environment variable. That way it's not exposed to the public and it's not in your source code. Let's go ahead and sign up. Cool. So we're creating an account. Okay, so next we're going to go to Web3 APIs. We have this API key here. We're going to copy that. Then we're going to put it. Now, like I said, again, do not actually put it into your source control. I am only doing this for convenience and for demo purposes. What you should actually be doing is putting this in an environment variable. There you have it. So now we have our API key for Morales. So let's go ahead and see what's inside this transaction service. So look at how simple that code is. Oh, crap. I'm going to have to change this API key. Anyway, I can do that later. So yeah, so we can go into source. So we have models, scenes, account, utils. I'm going to create a source, new file. services / transaction service.ts. Paste that in there. Yeah, so basically what this just basically does is that we're going to get all the transactions for the provided address and return it to our function. And then so we need to make sure we have Axios installed, so we're going to go ahead and do yarn add Axios. All right, so Axios has been installed. Again, sometimes you have to restart the server whenever you install a new package. Sometimes it picks up on how it reloads, sometimes it doesn't. And yeah, super important. Whenever you see stuff like this where I'm putting an API key directly in our code, do not do this. Right? This is just for demo purposes. I will be changing the API key, so make sure you use an environment variable when you're doing this kind of thing. And wow, there you have it. It works already. Boom, there you have it. We've created a wallet that allows us to see the balance in there, send it to a chosen destination, and we can also see all the different transactions that have occurred at our wallet. Now we're going to build this so we can run it in as a browser extension as well. Okay, so we found the Ethereum Foundation website. Again, we have to make sure it's the Goerli version though, right? Because we're using testnet. So we're going to go ahead and just copy that address. Our app is still building, so we're just going to go ahead and copy this address. Beautiful. Our app is now built. So if we, like I said earlier on, it automatically reloads. So if we actually just click on inspect pop-up, no, manage extension. We'll click on update. Beautiful. So if you go to ethereum.org, you say, you know what? We love the work that the Ethereum Foundation is doing. Let's send them some testnet ETH. So like I showed earlier on, we've copied their address here. So we're going to copy the address to clipboard. The first thing I want to do is I want to recover my existing account. So I'm going to go to recover account, put in my seed phrase, or I can put in my private key. Press enter. Brilliant. I can see that I have 0.02 ETH and I can see the 2 transactions that I've made. Next, I'm going to copy this here.
So now I'm going to be pasting in the Ethereum Foundation address.
Put the destination address and point 0.005 ETH. I'm going to send, and then, you know what, let's right click and inspect so we can see what's going on in terms of the API calls when we make this change. So we have 0.005 ETH, we're going to send that 0.005 ETH. And immediately right away, you can see that a couple calls went. The first one being ETH chain ID, gas price, get blocked by number, all that kind of stuff. Cool. The transaction has gone through, so we can see the transaction in a new tab. And then if we click on refresh transactions, you can see that now we have the one that we just sent now. We can see that it went to these addresses, and if we click, it will take us there. And then if we can click on Goerli transaction hash, we can see our transaction on the blockchain. And there we go. It went through successfully. And if you click on the browser extension again, our account automatically loads. And that is how you create a wallet on the blockchain.